Good morning, respected guests, esteemed speakers, ladies and gentlemen. Tibet House, Culture Center of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, welcomes you all to gathered here on second day of the 3-day festival on Legacy of Tibet. It's been a long day yesterday, but the spirit to learn, engage and discuss continue in all of us unabatedly. With this, let us now begin our first session of the second day of festival, Healing Attention Deficit Disorder in Today's Youth, Perspective of Western Psychology and Buddhist Psychology. And I would like to request Dr. Ashum Gupta ji to come up on the stage and chair this session. Dr. Ashum Gupta is the retired professor and the former head Department of Psychology in University of Delhi, former director Gandhi Bhavan University of Delhi, and currently she is an honorary professor and the Chancellor's nominee Punjab University in Chandigarh. She is serving as a chairperson governing body in Mirinda House, University of Delhi, a gold medalist from University of Delhi as well, and she has over 42 years of teaching and research experience. She has received several international and national awards and fellowships such as Fulbright Scholarship, British Psychological Society Award as the visiting psychologist in the United Kingdom. And she has been serving as a resource person for several organizations and is on the editorial board of few national journals. And I would like to request Dr. Ashum Gupta ji to proceed the session. Thank you very much. Over to you. Yeah.
Good morning, friends. Firstly, let me thank Geshe-la, Geshe Damdulji. I think I'm indeed very, very grateful to him. He always, invites me for various some such functions, and since I had such a long association with him, I feel highly privileged to come to Tibet House and participate in any manner. Okay, so I am very, very thankful to him first of all, and also the organizers for this 3-day festival. I think it's been a great honor for me to chair this session. I know in this session there are very distinguished speakers who are going to be speaking on a very important topic, attention deficit disorders. Now, most of you, when you hear of attention deficit disorders, we are talking about children. We are identifying the very small children who right from the age, 4 onwards, show certain features of inattention, hyperactivity, impulsivity, high distractibility, and so on and so forth. And for me also, it's been a great experience for decades now to be dealing with some such children. My own students who have worked with me on varied projects, my PhD scholars who worked on ADHD for last many, many years, we have gone to various schools in Delhi to find out if there is any such problem happening in the school. And to our surprise, I would say at least 8 to 10% of the children are found to be suffering in Delhi schools from ADHD. Now, ADHD is something which is identifiable easily because it has certain very observable features like hyperactivity, and children are very highly distractible in the classrooms. But what about ADD? My chief concern is also with ADD, because attention deficit, which is primarily to do with inattention, is not very visible in nature, and therefore we've got to use our assessment techniques. I have devised my own screening tools based on DSM-5, which we have been using for years together, and some of the symptoms which can be easily identified even for ADD. I think it's very important to work on ADD as well as ADHD. But also we see a whole lot of children, and I'm not talking of adults right now, I'll come to that. A whole lot of children are with combined types, ADD and ADHD both. That is what is the largest variety that we see around in the schools or outside. Now, when when we talking about adults now, in today's youth, as the topic says, yes, it's a big problem. It's a very big lifelong challenge for anybody who has suffered from ADD or ADHD at any stage of life. But I must tell you that there is so much of stigma in our society that parents, to start with, even for children, they're not very easily coming forward to get them treated or get them counseled or get them assessed in any form. But there are adults with ADHD or ADD. Now, nobody is actually looking after them, and they themselves don't go forward to seek some help. In my own experiences also, when I've been seeing children of these kinds, when parents come to me and number of sessions are held, then father or mostly the father would simply say, oh yes, even I had the same problem and I continue to suffer from the same problem. But they find it very difficult to acknowledge. So this is what I notice in the society, that it's so difficult to identify the adults because they see large number of features, because they're finding it so difficult to adjust in their environment. If they're working, they are frequently changing their jobs. They're not able to adjust with their spouses, with their own families and so on, even the pair relationship. And there are a whole lot of problems which they experience in their environment, and they themselves really wonder at times what is happening to them. And therefore what happens that we know ADHD, ADD is a neurodevelopmental disorder, and it continues for lifelong. Even though there are many treatment strategies that we use, intervention strategies of all kinds which are available, which are very effectively being used, but if you start the intervention at a very early stage, it's very important to start that, and therefore it is much easier to exercise some degree of control on these children. Particularly I'm talking about the executive control, which is something which is severely disturbed. And you can very well imagine, if there are the adults who are suffering from executive deficit difficulties, they will not be able to have good family relationships, job relationships, and they are suffering from a whole lot of emotional and behavioral problems later on in their lives. So whatever we talk about anxiety, depression is a secondary issue altogether. It's a cognitive difficulty basically. It's primarily a neurocognitive disorder which we must understand and how to deal with it. Now, I just only want to say, I don't have much time, but I would like to say that it's primarily a brain-related disorder. And there are problems in the default system of the brain neuronal network. And that is something which is found to be underactivation. And therefore, all the intervention strategies which we utilize for the treatment of ADHD, we must hit at that level so that the brain functioning starts somehow at a normal level. But that's not so very difficult. Before we start any interventions, for which the individualized educational programs have to be drawn, because in my experience, each and every child I have found to be so different, and therefore the IEPs have to be drawn, the individualized educational programs have to be drawn, where we require a lot of help from the parents and also from the teachers and whosoever the friends are. Without their support, it's very difficult to have the intervention successful. So what I mean to say is that if we are talking about the brain which is disturbed here in some form or the other, we are talking mostly if there are executive functioning disorders here in ADHD and ADD, this is primarily the dorsolateral frontal regions of the brain which are disturbed. And also along with that, we find a lot of problem in the parietal and temporal regions. These are the evidences that we have received so far from a large number of neuroimaging studies, functional MRI studies and other imaging studies which have been conducted so far. So we need to work even at the cerebellar level. So these are some of the regions which are severely disturbed, and particularly, as you all know, frontal regions are primarily responsible for executive functioning. So we have to target the intervention in such a manner so that we are doing some kind of changes are brought about in these frontal regions. So our programs have to be very much research guided, in the sense that we have to have models and we have to have theoretical formulations in a manner so that we work in the right direction to do a planning, so that interventions are targeted towards working memory, towards planning, towards management skills, towards time management, and also towards various other decision-making difficulties that these children or adults seem to be having. So with this, I would like to simply start the session. I can just go on and on and on based upon my experience, but we have very distinguished speakers for this session, and it's an opportunity for me to listen to all of you actually I would like to gain a good amount of knowledge and experience from you people who've been working in the field. So let's start the session, and I would like to invite the first speaker, Mr. Sinjoy Ghosh. Please come up. And Mr. Sinjoy Ghosh is a very well-known name. Mr. Ghosh, we have 20 minutes for you. Okay, it's just, you can present your work for 20 minutes. It's my honor to introduce Mr. Sinjoy Ghosh. He is heading the Department of Human Sciences at Hopetown Girls School. He teaches psychology to grades 11 and 12, and he's in charge of the school editorial board. There are a large number of societies that he's also taking care of. They run what we call life skills program, health and safety coordinator he has been, and also he is the school counselor. Currently, he is collaborating with the University of Berkeley on creating a school curriculum based on the principles of socio-emotional learning. Apart from teaching, he is also the founding member of a Dehradun-based initiative called Prakriya. The idea of this initiative is to create a dynamic and engaging space for young people from various walks of life to come together and have dialogues on education, art, and mental health. So, Mr. Sinjoy is doing very good work. I have visited Hopetown School. I was invited by them, and it's a wonderful school, let me tell you, and they're doing such marvelous things over there. So, Mr. Sinjoy Ghosh, please, the floor is all yours. And we also, I forgot to say quickly, I would say that for this session, we have moderator, Ms. Tenzing Doma. So give a big hand to her, please. And to all the speakers. Thank you.
So first of all, thank you, ma'am. And sorry, I'm, not used to all these things. You see, I'm always in the class. But I would start this talk with a deep sense of gratitude for Geshe Dorje Damdu and to the Tibet House, and of course, His Holiness, under whose patronage and blessing today we are all together here in this very room. And also, it's a wonderful opportunity to share chair with Shun ma'am, because she's of course a well-known personality in Delhi University. So thank you, ma'am. So, I'm a teacher, and so my day actually involves a lot of interaction with students. So the presentation that I'm going to share with you here, am I audible? Yeah. So it may not be a very professional kind of presentation, so very sorry for that. So I would like to start with the story, because that's what I usually do in my classes. So I don't know how many of you know about Nasiruddin Hoja. So it's a very famous character. So when I think most of us have read about him when we were young, it used to come out in this comic book called Tinkle. So this is one story that I really like, and it has a lot of meaning inside. So one day what happened that Nasiruddin Hoja, it was quite late at night, and he was frantically looking for something out in the street, right? And there was this street lamp, and under that he was looking for it. So his neighborhood, his best friend was staying, and this friend could hear a lot of noise from outside. So of course he, came out and tried to see what's happening, and saw Hoja frantically searching or looking for something. So he came up and asked, "Hey there, may I help you with something?" So Hoja was like, I lost my wife's ring, and I need to find it out, or otherwise she will not be, let me enter the house. So could you please help me? So then both of them started looking. So after a good 15-20 minutes, this friend was really fed up, right? So what happened was that he asked Hoja that, could you please help me understand as to where exactly I need to look? So Hoja smilingly said that, look, I actually lost the ring in the basement of my house. So this friend was really furious, that what? And, we are wasting time looking for the ring here. So Hoja said, look, there's a lot of light here, and there's darkness in my basement. So that's why I was looking here. So that's where the story ends, and it might sound very, very, very silly. but it has a very deep meaning, and in meaning in actually two ways. One is what exactly we are looking at, that is, do we have a correct understanding of the problem? And the other important thing is that people who are there to help us, are we giving them the correct opportunity or the right kind of guidance to help us? So when we are dealing with ADHD, so first of all, I mean, as a teacher and also I'm a parent, so I can say one thing, that there is a lot of confusion. First confusion is that most of us are not aware of what ADHD is. And the second, there are a lot of myths around. So I will share one, and that is that in one of the parent-teacher meeting, so this parent comes and says that, my child, so the child is in, grade 11th. I will not share the names, that's confidential. I said that, she's not focusing on anything and she has been like this. Now she's growing up, she needs to understand. So somebody has said that she must have ADHD and she eats a lot of chocolate, So they said that it's because of that chocolate intake, the sugar that is going inside the body, that has caused ADHD. So there are many, wrong information about this whole thing. So what I thought, when I was actually asked to present on this, so my thing was to understand as to how should I approach this whole thing as a psychologist or as a teacher, as a parent. And I thought that it's better that I approach this as a teacher first and a counselor. And of course, there are other distinguished guests here who would, of course, share their own expertise. So this presentation also will focus a little bit on what we have started doing in our very own little ways, to understand and engage with ADHD students. So if you can see the presentation says mindful approach to ADHD, and it's like, oh my God, how is it possible, right? So, because ma'am has already said, that stands for attention deficit, and we know that mindfulness is a little bit opposite to that, right? So what I thought is that we'll start with a little bit of introduction, because as I mentioned that it's very important to understand the problem at hand first. And of course, when we have a clear understanding, only then we can actually try and understand how to go about it. So I'll start with my presentation. So first is, in simple ways, I've tried to explain what ADHD is, so known as Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And earlier, actually, it was known as ADD. It was only after 1987 that it was renamed to ADHD. So what happened, that group of psychologists, psychiatrists, so when they were doing a lot of research, they found that apart from the attention, hyperactivity was also a very, very challenging issue. And that is when they actually changed the name from ADD to ADHD. So it's a disorder where the person has difficulty in paying attention and controlling impulsive behavior. So that's a very, very simple definition which can help us understand. But it's not that simple also, because when we try to understand as to what exactly the symptoms are and to identify, so there are actually three types of ADHD, which of course ma'am already spoke about a bit. So one is which only predominantly inattentive. So where the individual, it's hard for the individual to organize or to finish a task, to pay attention to details and follow instructions or conversations. Then the next type is predominantly hyperactive and impulsive, where the person is constantly, fidgeting, or the person is talking a lot. It is hard to sit still for a long time, especially when you're doing homework, and it's very, very visible, with young people. Small children may run up, climb, jump constantly. There is also a feeling of restlessness, and there is also a lot of a sense of impulse. So someone who is impulsive may interrupt what others are doing, or you might see suddenly snatching something or grabbing something, or maybe constantly interfering when somebody else is talking. And of course, the third type is when these two come together. And in most of the cases, if I'm not mistaken, what we have found out that it's the third type which is most prevalent, at least in our schools. Am I right, ma'am? Yes. So these are the three types, Now, very important, when we talk about ADHD, and of course, the first important thing is the attention. So the general idea is that the person is not attentive. Now, that's a very, very simple way of, approaching the problem, because when we talk about inattention, there's actually a whole lot of things apart from just not paying attention. So just let's take a look. So one important thing is this ability to focus on only one thing and not to pay attention to anything else. Confusion or inability to decide on what to focus on. Inability to maintain attention or how to shift focus when required. So when, let's say, the child is doing a task and there is a change of task, so the child will actually feel a lot challenging to shift his focus or her focus from that task to the current task. Then difficulty in listening when directly addressed, and of course difficulty in paying attention to details. So apart from just not paying attention, so if we are actually trying to understand whether a child or an individual is having ADHD, these are also some of the most important things that we need to consider as a parent, as a teacher, as an educator, as a counselor. Now, the other very important part is the understanding hyperactivity. And of course, fidgeting is a very, very common thing that we usually see. But apart from that, the other thing to do is also the inability to sit at one position for a very long time. Then, of course, when the child or let's say a teenager is involved in doing some activity, maybe it's a playful activity, so they have a lot of difficulty in playing that activity quietly. And the other important thing is that excessive talking. So when talking is not required, the child feels the need to talk, to share something. I hope I'm not going too fast, right? Yeah. So impulsivity, that is not waiting for his or her turn, interrupting conversations and intruding into others' activity, and blurting answers before the teacher or parent has finished asking the question. So I have also put some of the observations that we come across in day-to-day school life. These are some of the secondary symptoms. So when what we have talked about right now, these are the primary symptoms. But apart from that, there are secondary symptoms. That is excessive worrying, boredom, frustration, low self-esteem, and sleep disturbances. So I'm not going into detail of all these things. Of course, I hope that other speakers will talk about it. Now, a little bit about the causes. So frankly speaking, there is no one can pinpoint that this is the cause for why ADHD is there. It's basically an interplay of a lot of psychological and biological forces coming together. But some of the things that researchers have been able to identify, that is of course genes, the role of genes, then cigarette smoking, alcohol use during pregnancy, exposure to environmental toxins, low birth weight, and of course brain injuries. This is my favorite part actually. So as a teacher and as a parent, you come across a lot of things. So the very important things to understand and come out of the stereotypes. One is that we always think that ADHD is something affecting younger kids, and when they grow up, everything is going to be fine. That's not the case. It stays with them when they are into teenagers, into adult life. Yes, for some, they are able to cope up. For some people, it becomes really, really difficult, right? So nearly more than 80% of children with ADHD go on to have symptoms as adolescents and teenagers. The other thing, which I usually hear a lot, that usually parents are blamed, for ADHD children. But let me tell you, there is no evidence, no research which point out that ADHD has anything to do with parenting styles. Of course, it plays an important role to facilitate a supportive environment for the child, but it's not the cause of ADHD. So that is something that we need to understand. And the other thing is that this idea, especially in India, that ADHD can only happen to poor children. So that's another misinformation, right? It can happen to anybody, right? Okay, so just quickly, when I talk about, or when I say the word adolescence, what comes to your mind? Sorry, I'm a teacher, so end of the day I interact. So anybody can say, when I say the word adolescence, what comes to your mind? Young people, absolutely.
Age of stress and storm.
Yes, age of stress and storm. So that is something actually I was looking at. So when we're talking about adolescence, so there are a lot of challenges, for an adolescent, right? Starts with the academic challenges, and then there are like the raging hormones. There is, they are also trying to establish their own identity, right? Relationship issues. They are not adults, neither they are children. It's kind of a no man's land for them, right? And in all this confusion or challenge, if you just mix ADHD, it becomes really havoc for the child. And not only for the child alone, but also for people around, because there is so much of challenges to how to engage with the child. So that is something that we need to understand about adolescence. I will quickly shift and something that we have been trying to do. So it's all started with blessing of Geshe Dorje Damdul. So 3 years back when he visited, and he actually conducted a mindfulness session with the students, and a lot of students actually attended the session, and among them there were a few students who were actually having ADHD. And what happened that they came up to me and said that, sir, I felt very relaxing and I was happy for some time. So that's the idea how it had happened. And of course, Geshe has been coming to our school and interacting with the students. And so what we have been doing is currently we have started, implementing some of the mindfulness approaches in our school schedule, trying to work with students, teenagers who have been identified with ADHD. So there is this organization in Delhi, Children's First, who actually help us in identifying. And once the students are identified, and of course then we try and see how we can make the whole process of learning more meaningful for them, and cutting down the challenges. So just a brief information. I know I'm not the very good person to talk about it. I think Geshe would be better. So, but what I understand is that it's a practice of being attentive in every moment when we are talking about mindfulness, noticing what is taking place both inside and outside without judgment, and simply we can say it's the act of paying attention. It's a little bit different from meditation, although it can be complementary. So there are a lot of studies actually which has happened where it has shown that mindfulness, how it has been used and what are the positive responses. So these are the two very important studies. So in 2008, neuroscientist Richard Davidson and his colleagues, University of Wisconsin, so they almost implemented mindfulness with more than 100 students, and there was enhanced ability to cool down their emotion when they got stirred up. And the other is, of course, Dr. Lisa and her colleagues found that using mindfulness meditation brought about improved ability to maintain focus and block out distractions. So, in evidence at hand, so that is where we started working. So, first of all, when we are talking about mindfulness approach and implementing it, it is very important to understand that we ourselves first need to go through a process. and only then we will be able to help a child engage in mindfulness. So again, I would thank Yeshila here for coming and doing sessions with the teachers, which really helped us, and few of us took forward. So in 2018, actually, where we identified 5 students with ADHD. Out of these 5, 2 were in grade 11th, 1 in 10th, and the rest 2 in grade 9th. And we started implementing mindfulness practices with them in the month of October. And right after 3 months, so if I'm talking about this year, February, so there were actually vast changes that was noticed in all these 5 students. More to do with confidence. The important thing was what we found, that there was a lot of self-love. So at the end of these 3 months, the students, they started appreciating themselves a lot. Like for example, the one student who would come and say, "Sir, I'm very happy today. When are we going to do the next session?" Right? So these are the kind of statements that really help us understand that, okay, what we are trying to do is actually working at some level or the other. Of course, we have a long way to go. Some of the mindfulness method that we use in this is, which is one of the most common, 7-11. So you simply ask a child to breathe in for 7 seconds and breathe out for the next 11 seconds, and you do it in 4 to 5 rounds. So it really helps to quieten the chatter in the child's mind. Because remember, when we are talking about ADHD child, so there is a lot of rushing thoughts in their head. The second is really fun, pause bell. So in my class, what I do usually, so I have this app called the mindfulness bell, right? So whenever we are doing something, so I usually time it before entering the class. And the instruction that we're given is that whenever you hear the sound of the bell, you will leave everything and focus on your breath. Just for 2 minutes. And we'll start working. And this has actually helped. This has actually helped us in a very, very important manner. The other is mindful walk, which we have started using. And the latest addition to this is what we have just introduced, is mindful eating. So when we are eating in our school, it's a residential school, so we all eat together. So usually, there is a lot of talking and chatter. So what we have started doing is, just enjoying the whole experience of eating. And of course, after this, we have sessions where we sit together and the child shares the experience. And there's something like, "Sir, मैंने दाल तो बहुत बार पिया है, but आज जो दाल पिया ना मैंने, the taste was really different." But it's the same, almost the same kind of dal that they are being served. But it's the whole act of mindfulness which is creating that different experience. So that's my thing, and I have 1 minute. So I would like to end with a story. That is, it happened in Buddha's lifetime that one day Buddha was giving teaching, and there was this traveler who would come down from the mountains, and he was actually a tradesman. So he would attend the teaching, and then every time he would go back and start practice. But when Buddha would do something on the practice, he would not come, because the idea is that I can do it myself. And then he would fail, So one day he mustered a lot of courage and asked Buddha that, "Respected sir, you tell me and I try to follow it, but it doesn't happen. Why?" So Buddha says that, "You seem to be a tradesman, right?" He said, "Yes." "You're a traveler, you travel the mountain?" "Yes." "So let's say if I want to go to a certain place in the mountain, what will you do?" "I'll guide you, sir. I'll draw you a map. And do you think that I will be easily able to navigate after that?" "No, sir. There will be challenges and difficulties." So Buddha asked, "Why?" So he said, "Sir, because for me it's an experience. I'm doing it constantly. For you it's a new thing." So one of the important learnings that I want to share is, this approach can only work when we start ourselves experiencing this approach. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful talk. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Because we're running short of time, so we'll have the question answers in the end. Okay, so we'd like to have the next speaker now. Next speaker for the session is Dr. Ankit Goel. Please come. Please come forward. And I welcome Dr. Ankit Goel for this session. Please. Please have a seat. Dr. Ankit Goel is a student of Buddhism and regularly attends various teachings given at the Tibet House, New Delhi, by Venerable Geshe Dorji Damdulji. He is currently following the Master's course in Nalanda Buddhist Philosophy offered at Tibet House, New Delhi. He received his BTech in Computer Science and Engineering from IIT BHU in 2002 and PhD in Computer Science from National University of Singapore in 2009. Welcome to the session. Thank you.
Hello, am I audible? Yes. So, good morning, Venerable Geshe-la, Madam Chairperson, all the esteemed speakers, and all the audience. So, I feel kind of an odd one out here giving the talk on involving two topics here, Buddhist psychology and ADHD. As you would have heard, my background is completely in technology, and even my work is mostly in finance. So, but still with the kindness of whatever I've been learning under Geshe-la, so I'll share that with you from the perspective of Buddhist psychology. And ADHD has already been very wonderfully presented by Shinjoy ji. So whatever I'll be talking about mostly be repetition of that in the context of ADHD. So as the topic says, we are talking about ADHD, and my focus will be from the perspective of Buddhist psychology. Can we contribute to its understanding in a better way? One, and number two, how can we help directly address its symptoms more from the point of single-pointed meditation? So just to start with what is Buddhist psychology, to give a high-level overview, how does it fits in? So all our actions that we do, basic agenda that we all have as human beings and any being in general, is that we seek happiness and we avoid to shun any kind of suffering, physical or mental. That is how we are driven at the end of the day. And how do these experiences arise? If we look down at the mechanism of various experiences of happiness or suffering that arise within us, the underlying mechanism would be when our mind, I will also be using the term subject to relate to mind, when our mind interacts with any other object other than it. So when these two interact, then various kind of experiences arise of happiness, suffering, however they would be. So when we look in depth, we realize that the experience would depend not only just the state of this object, that we always blame that the outside environment is what is responsible for how we are feeling. And typically we tend to blame the outside factors more and less of our own selves. But if we look carefully, we realize that yes, the outside objects do play a role. For example, if a person meets a very good friend, he's meeting that friend after a long time, the person might feel very elated and happy. At the same time, if you meet a very quarrelsome neighbor, you would be very much wanting to move away from that person and feeling unhappy. So in this case, even though the subject is same, you have the same person, but because of different outside circumstances, you are behaving differently. But on the other hand, you might have the same external object, but you might react to that thing differently under different circumstances. For example, say one might like to eat pizza a lot. And if you are very hungry and somebody brings a very fresh pizza, you will feel very happy and you would feel very pleasant feeling would arise inside you. On the other hand, say if your stomach is upset and you're feeling very nauseated, and the same pizza or food is brought in front of you, you'll feel kind of reversed. So we see that it's both the subject as the mind, as the object, both play a role in how we react, what feelings arise inside us. So pleasant experiences are fine. So if we talk about just the suffering experiences that we more predominantly want to avoid. So the analogy that Venerable Geshe-la uses, and which I also, which is kind of simple and yet effective, is that miseries are like the sound of a clap, which arise when two hands come together. And here, the two hands, from the perspective of, say, the Buddhist psychology, they would represent the one hand representing the ignorance that we have pertaining to the subject and the mind, and other hand represents the ignorance pertaining to the objects that the mind interacts with. Now, ignorance is a very broad term. Very specifically in this context, what I mean by ignorance is misperception pertaining to the reality of the things. Ignorance pertaining to the objects is the gap in how we perceive the objects and what is their reality. As long as this ignorance is there, we are bound to have some form, there is bound to be conflict in how we interact with things. Likewise, if we don't have a very good understanding of our own selves, and that is, we have ignorance pertaining to our own mind or subject, then again there will be a conflict, and our functioning cannot be very smooth in that context. So given this overall view, so if our aim is to eradicate the miseries for once and for all and from the root, then it becomes important for us to really understand what this ignorance is and what steps can we take to remove them. So there it comes that the counteracting force would be the wisdom, that is the mind, which actually knows and understands that reality of the objects and the reality of the subjects. So again, if we talk about, in the case of the reality, there can be several levels of the reality. For example, in general, we may think that things are permanent in nature. Somebody would get very unhappy if something breaks down. So at a very gross level, if some person is habituated in knowing that things are impermanent, and if something breaks, it's their very own nature. So if that wisdom is cultivated, then person may not be upset if something breaks or a person loses something. So as an illustration, this is one level of ignorance the person may have, and as countering its wisdom, the person may be able to help to remove that suffering in relation to that ignorance. So in order to here, the wisdom that we are talking about is that which is able to understand the reality in its most refined form, in terms of the objects and in terms of the subjects. So I'm not going into very much detail here as to what that reality is. I'm just presenting an overview where the Buddhist psychology kind of fits in here. And technically, when we go on the study of the subjects in general, that is known as ontology, and the studies of the domains that deal with this ontology are in general philosophy and various other subjects in modern science such as physics, biology, chemistry, etc. And specifically talking from the point of view of the Buddhist philosophy here. So the subtlest of the object is technically known as objective clear light. It's just a technical term, and I'm not going into detail here. And likewise, if we talk about the subject and the mind, its study in general is covered under the domain of psychology, and under modern science, epistemology, neuroscience, cognitive science, etc. There can be other many subjects that I may not be aware of and I might have missed here. And again, the subtlest of the mind, if we try to, from this Buddhist psychology point of view, it is known as the subjective clear light mind. Now, this is again just a technical term, and in order to really experience it and know, one thing is obviously to know it intellectually. It's in very detailed, in-depth systematic study is what the subject of psychology provides. Buddhist psychology, I know, and I'm sure the other psychology systems in other traditions would also be providing their own versions of what is the reality of this mind. So the whole idea of what I presented here in these two slides is from the point to put what role Buddhist psychology plays from the perspective within Buddhism. So it deals primarily with an understanding and how our mind functions, and our whole idea is to understand the subtlest level of our mind, and not just to understand that intellectually, but to be able to experience it on the one hand, and on the other hand, by the means of study of topics such as philosophy and other areas, we would also like to understand what is the subtlest form of object that this mind interacts with, and understand their reality in the most refined form. And once both these things we know intellectually as well as an experiential level, and these two come together, then we can hope to eliminate the ignorance from its root, ignorance pertaining to the objects and ignorance pertaining to the subjects. And that provides a mechanism for us, a hope and mechanism to eliminate all our miseries. So in the context of this talk, for dealing with ADHD, from the perspective of Buddhist psychology, I'll focus on, because we're talking from the perspective of Buddhist psychology, which primarily deals with mind, though focus is on the mind here. And why focus on mind? If we think even a little bit, we see that the kind of person we are, whether happy or sad, sharp faculty, low faculty, dim-witted, kind, angry person, primarily boil down to our mind, the quality and the nature of how we are. The main decisive factor is based on our mind. So it becomes very important for us to really know our own mind and how it functions, because only then, if we are able to see deep inside clearly and how it is functioning, how we are reacting to things, only then we can hope to gain some control over it, and then be able to direct it towards the factors that can lead gradually towards elimination of the actions that lead towards more of suffering, and enhance the actions that can lead more towards the more harmonious and happy state, not only within ourselves but also in our interaction with others. So then, what is mind? Again, this definition here is from the Buddhist psychology perspective, and different traditions would have their own definitions and understanding of what this thing mind is. So it is defined as an agent which is clear and knowing. So for this, we need to understand what is meant by clarity and what is meant by knowing. Obviously, if something knows, there has to be a knower. So that is why the word agent is used. To explain the clarity aspect, I'll use the analogy of a mirror. So in a mirror, for a reflection to appear, two things are required. First of all, the surface of mirror should be clean and clear, free from stains. And second thing, there has to be some kind of illumination. Light has to be there for us to be able to see the mirror. So the clarity aspect of the mind has these two connotations. That mind has clarity in the sense of being freed of stains. And okay, let me just use an illustration. So for example, if I would ask you to close your eyes and think about a flower, say a sunflower, so the image of sunflower would appear in your mind. You would be able to see it. So as I said, there is an image where it is formed. So the agent where it is formed, that is what we are calling mind. And the clarity aspect is what is enabling that image to appear. along with the clarity, the another aspect is illumination. When your eyes are closed, there is no light inside, but still you're able to see it. So this clarity aspect has two connotations. One is being freed of dirt or stains, and the second aspect is the luminosity of the brain, the luminosity aspect. And then talking about the knowing nature of this agent. See, when an image appears in a mirror, the mirror does not know that an image is formed in it. But in our case, if I ask you, do you know that you saw the image of sunflower and you thought about it? You would say, yes, I know it. So there is a knower there. So this mind also has this knowing element. So that is what is meant by the clear and knowing nature. So now bringing ADHD in perspective. So again, I'm not at all an expert or have background in this thing, but it will be a repetition of what Shinjoji has covered and very beautifully explained by Madam Chairperson. So as you know, it is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and primarily characterized by one or more of these three conditions: being inattentive, hyperactive, and impulsive. And as we heard, being inattentive may have several kind of variations. Not being able to pay attention if somebody is talking to you, or even if you're paying attention, you overlook the details or miss the details. You are not able to finish something that you started to do. And being hyperactive, as the name suggests, that you are fidgety all the time. You're not able to sit still. You act when you're not supposed to do these kind of things. And impulsive behavior is more like acting rashly without paying a thought to a thing, and likewise. And again, as we all have heard, that the precise causes of ADHD are not clearly known, and it is usually a combination of several factors, including genetic, neurological, and diet, stress, environmental, such as concentration of lead and other things. So since the causes are not very clearly known, and research has shown that there can be several contributory factors, so again the treatment has to take a multi-pronged approach, which is what usually is done with a combination of medication and behavioral cognitive therapy, and also creating a conducive environment as per the suited needs of the person suffering from it. So now bringing in the ADHD and Buddhist psychology together. So for the purpose of discussion, I will just classify the causes of ADHD as internal and external. This is just my classification, and nothing is standard out there. So in the internal factors, I would just consider all the factors that are related to mind, such as stress, anxiety, or any other factors, mental factors. And in the external factors, all of the factors I would categorize as external factors, such as genetic, neurological. So again, because Buddhist psychology is our focus here, I'll just focus on the internal factors and what role does Buddhist psychology can play in terms of better understanding. If we understand Buddhist psychology better and how mind functions, can we use it applied in this condition of ADHD? Because it is a very vast and deep area, I'll just pick up two points from this thing. One, I would be talking about the cognitive and affective aspects of our mind. And this topic I picked up, so it's my personal feeling that it might help in better understanding about the underlying causes of ADHD. And other topic is single-pointed meditation or meditative concentration, which has very similar to what Shinjoji already presented, that it can directly help in alleviating the symptoms of ADHD. So, speaking about the topic of cognitive and affective minds, this is a very beautiful categorization within Buddhist psychology. So, what we call as cognitive mind is the aspect of a mind that basically just decides what a thing is. For example, this is a glass of water. So, this mind just decides, oh, this is not a chocolate. And so this is the cognitive mind, which makes decision with discern things, which knows what a thing is. But it doesn't mean that it is always correct. It may be wrong. For example, during an evening, I may see a tree standing in the far, and I may mistake that as a person. I may discern that, okay, there's a person standing there. It is a cognitive mind, but it is an invalid cognitive mind. The affective aspect of the mind is more to do with the affinity towards the object the cognitive mind is discerned. I like whether it indicates more of the movement of the mind towards the object or away from the object, or more in a neutral manner. For example, the example I just said, that I may be walking and I mistake the tree as a person, and I may feel very happy. Okay, that person might help me to find the way around here. Mind is pulled. And likewise, it may get scared. Okay, I'm alone in the evening and this person might be a robber. The mind may get pulled. And okay, I'm not interested in this person. That is more of a neutral reaction. So these are affective minds which make the mind move. So just how these things are linked together. So as I said earlier, that all our experiences are depend on our action, our happiness or suffering. Now, what makes us perform any actions is the affective side of our mind, which makes the mind moves. This affective side, in turn, is driven by the information which is discerned by the cognitive mind. So here, understanding this chain helps us to understand that the more valid or closer this cognitive mind is to the reality, the more smoother and harmonious our affective minds would be. The consequent actions would be more proper, in tune with reality. And the resulting actions will be, again, which are more in accord, the more harmonious our actions would be, and tending towards more happiness and less of suffering. So here, just as an illustration, I've listed some cognitive, so there's a very standard categorization of cognitive minds. There are various kinds. It's just one of the categorizations, sevenfold division in Buddhist psychology. So I'm not going to go through these, just saying that at the bottom, if you see, the seventh is the deceptive of wrong consciousness. It is the most crude and the wrong form of mind. For the example I gave of a person mistaking a tree as a human being, that is like a deceptive or wrong mind. And any action that it takes, for example, if it gets fearful seeing that object, it is fear. It is, getting anxious. But that anxious is completely unfounded because the cognitive element is wrong. And as we go higher in this categorization, they become more refined. So at the top, the mind that we have at the top, direct, valid, perceiver, that is the most valid mind here. So the whole idea of this categorization and this perspective is that gradually one should be able to go gradually cultivate these most valid cognitive minds. And likewise, some illustrations of affective minds, again, virtuous minds like love, compassion, feeling of harmony towards others, and non-virtuous affective minds like anger, hatred, jealousy, and harmfulness. So just how do we relate this categorization of cognitive and affective minds with ADHD? So just to recap, the ADHD primarily we associate with these three conditions of being inattentive, hyperactive, and impulsive. And again, within Buddhist psychology, there is another very interesting list of categorization of how the mind functions in relation to the objects, and the various functions of the minds are categorized as there's a broad categorization called mind and mental factors. So I'm not going to describe in detail, but within the mental factors there are 5 categories, such as virtuous mental factors, non-virtuous mental factors. So I've just picked from those illustrations of afflictive mental factors, which are 6 root and 20 secondary afflictions. So not going to their definitions, but let me just go through these. So I picked up 5 examples from the secondary afflictions. So first one is dullness or lethargy. I've just taken the definition verbatim from the psychology text. Just give me 2 minutes. Yeah. Yeah, so just going through one definition. So, for example, dullness is the fogginess of the mind, which makes the mind heavy and lax. The coarse dullness is when the object is unclear, and so on. Likewise, forgetfulness, distraction, and there's self-explanatory, excitement, and non-introspection. I'll just like to go through the definition of non-introspection. This mental factor is a distorted intelligence that rationally engages in the actions through the three doors of body, speech, and mind, either due to lack of analysis or faulty analysis. Now, the idea of presenting these definitions, picking up these, I found them very similar to the conditions of the ADHD. For example, being attentive can be related to dullness, forgetfulness, distraction. Being hyperactive can again be related to distraction, excitement. And impulsive is very closely, if you go, related to non-introspection. And these are just the 5 from 51 and other mental factors. So these similarities between the conditions that characterize ADHD and above listed mental factors bring us see that Buddhist psychology can really contribute in some way in deepening our understanding of the factors of ADHD. And again, all these factors that I've listed, they are affective in nature. They're not cognitive. So the symptoms are mostly affective in nature, which are what are visible. And again, from Buddhist psychology point of perspective, these are all afflictions. They are not virtuous minds. They are non-virtues. And because they're afflictions, the cognitive minds that must be driving them, they must be erroneous somehow. So it's so then again, somebody who is an expert in the area of Buddhist psychology as well as ADHD, I think if two people they come together, they can make more out of this thing. So I think I'll skip the second part because that was also already touched upon by Shinjoy-ji. And thank you.
Thank you very much. I think very interesting. You highlighted the Buddhist psychologist. It's very important to understand that part. Now we have the third speaker for the session, Professor Pritha Mukhopadhyay. But will she be able to sit? She will not. You'll stand?
Yes, I will stand.
Yeah, okay. Please just relax. I'll introduce you and then we can start. Professor Pritha Mukhopadhyay. She is a professor at the Department of Psychology, University of Calcutta, and the coordinator of the UGC funded center with the potential for excellence in particular area.
No problem.
University of
Just make
Calcutta.
it bit forward. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. She's carrying out research with quantitative EEG and brain train programs at CPEPA. Her research interests lie in the areas of psychophysiology and neuropsychology. She has more than 60 journal publications at national and international levels and has authored 10 book chapters published by Sage, Springer and Pentium Press, among others. She is recipient of several research projects awarded by UGC, ICSSR, AICTE, and DIPR and DST. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am has come from Calcutta all the way, and we would like to have your expert session
so
on
much,
this. Ma'am has some difficulty with
This morning.
some backache. Yeah, suddenly it came up. So she will have to stand all through her presentation. Please make yourself comfortable. Yeah, please.
So please give me a signal before I see you. So you can listen. No, I'm audible. Please 5 minutes before you. So, respected ma'am, respected sir, I'm really thankful that you have given me this opportunity. Respected delegates and my dear scholars and students over here. Actually, I guessed that there will be many speakers who will be speaking on ADHD as such. But what I do believe that suppose when I do consider intellectually impaired children, because if I do consider the normal distribution, they are either in the -1, -2, or -3 +3 level of intelligence, we think that we are superior to them. But if we do consider the people in the +1, +2, +3 level, we are at the same position in the middle. So for that reason, I'm not addressing the children suffering or the youth suffering from ADHD per se, but compared to those who have achieved that level of attention monitoring, I believe we are at the same phase. That is, we also have the difficulty in attention monitoring, be we operate in external mode of behavior or in the internal mode of behavior. So for that reason, I have chosen the topic, ma'am, mindfulness for attention monitoring of youth. As ma'am was saying beautifully, that is what type of behavior in the ADHD children we do address. We are also working with the ADHD children, and we also address the sustenance of attention, working memory, response to disinhibition, and so on, with the computerized program or also with the home-based program. So here I will be addressing the youth. And also we do know that is, if we do take the developmental trajectory, then it may happen that those who had the ADD, hyperactivity, then oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, and in adolescence they also can show a lot of problems. So in that way, the symptoms of ADD take some different nature, but maybe at the root it is there. So as per the definition of WHO, so it is the youth are individuals around the age of 15-24 years of age, and this is one of the most formative years of life when they have to take a lot of decisions about their education, about the career, family, and their social status and so on. And across all the ages, youth are actually affected by the social context in which they are, and this present era youth are no exception. And the major thing when they come with the problem, we do find that major things which affect them is transition from the traditional collectivistic culture to urbanized microfamily culture predominated by individualistic outlook. It's not that they are saying because of this reason I'm facing the problem, but when you do the analysis, we find that be they in the traditional family or in the nuclear family, this formation of this individualistic outlook is there. So why I'm saying prompted, something is not prompted, suppose if I like to take ice cream, so it is not prompted, I like now. But if it is so, there is a menu card, I'm seeing the ice cream is written over there, it is something prompted. So I have written here prompted because of the fact that this individualistic outlook development is not the need or the desire of these youth only, but they are born in that society which encourages this particular outlook. And also, it is also prompted pressure to perform best in every aspect of life, so very competition-oriented outlook, and also development of digitally inclined mode of communication and socialization. So I'm not taking it in a very psychological way, maybe. That is, there is an individual difference in the way people process information and the way they do behave. So they may develop the internal mode of responding, or it may be external mode of responding. It's not that everybody express pathological symptoms. There may be some there who develop, but others maintain a stable lifestyle with view towards self and world. And we find that those who are externally driven are usually, they are less socially conditioned, by which I cannot detail it, I do not have time, by which I want to mean those who are less conditioned to guilt, less conditioned to shame, which is required for self-controlling, for behavioral controlling. And those who are the externally directed, externally driven, their conditioning is less, but internally directed people are well conditioned to the social norms and they're the rule-abiding person. So you find there are two types of people. Those who are in the internally conditioned, they have adequate attention monitoring capacity. They're well-directed, morally sound, law-abiding, self-control, and also they have good intent. And externally driven may have flat attention. It again varies from person to person. Flat attention, stimulus-bound, less strong sense of morality. They are very much novelty-seeking because they're stimulus-driven, and poor self-control. They have response disinhibition. And from the perspective of Buddhism, it can say they may be shameless in the sense when they they show the self-disrespect. They may be reckless, which shows that they do not have the respect for others. And if the attention monitoring difficulty is more, they may show the restlessness also. So most common causes of distress which has been derived is in tortoises are isolation, meaninglessness, and difficulty in monitoring too much freedom. So let us see what I do mean by it. That is, isolation means when they have the very individualistic outlook, microfamily system, and I say outcome-oriented upbringing. From the very, from the very beginning of life, when they just first comes to the school or like that, the parents, even the parents and the parents themselves, they say that actually you have to come first. So you have to be a doctor, you have to be an engineer. So they project to the outcome as if persuasion of knowledge is instrumental to get that outcome. And this meaninglessness comes from the materialistic striving. This materialistic striving even starts from you have to get 80%, 90%, that is from the Marx point of view, and their pro-social behavior is not encouraged. Even the parents say, okay, she has not come to this class, so it's her problem, you don't have to share your copy with her. So this type of thing we do see, because our department is almost an OPD, and every day we have to see a lot of cases. And because the engagement in sports and play, it has been reduced to a minimum. We know that children learns a lot from automatically they learn cooperation, automatically they know how to compete with the opponent team, automatically they learn how to handshake when I'm defeated, automatically they learn how to accept defeat easily. All these things are now, reduced to a minimum. The opportunity is minimum. And particularly, the trust, that is the identification-based trust, that leads to the common sharing of vision, common way of perceiving the goal, sharing with others, which is at the core of the team building, it is also minimized. And the pleasure of team building is not there in the youth today. So that has perhaps lead to sense of perceptual displeasure, emptiness, and sense of vacuum and freedom. Traditional society, provides us with some anchoring point by providing some structure. And the current, I will not say scientifically advanced, they have written it, technologically advanced society, actually they break this lifestyle and they give the unstructured free lifestyle. We have seen many of the boys, very bright boys, who have gone abroad for their study. I remember right at this moment two friends, so they were very brilliant. One went to Columbia University and could pursue the goal, got the PhD, very well settled. And at the same time, his friend, they went together, and totally that friend, they began to develop the reckless lifestyle, totally deviated from the goal. So don't you think that it is a difficulty in the monitoring of their attention and to stick to the goal or on purpose? So this type of problems lead, on the one hand, insecurity, anxiety, depression sort of thing, and another, on the other hand, non-committal lifestyle. So we say too much outcome is achievement motivation is fine, because there I'm going to realize my potential. Yes, I have the zeal for that, I will do that. But too much outcome-oriented achievement motivation, what I do find from the very renowned institute even in our country, sometimes naturally they call us to get some psychological help, and their teachers are complaining. The students, the moment they get the admission in the institute, what they do, they are not interested, study. They do not come to the class regularly, but they are now striving for, if I do go abroad and in which company I will be settled down, what dollar I will be incoming. So you see, that is a future projected attention, but not living in present. And I say, isn't too much tiring? So if I get frustrated for some reason, if I fail to reach some goal, and if I do say it becomes a source of frustration. So can't I say that it is clinginess to the goal more than to interpret why I didn't reach the goal? And comparison of self with others, unlike externalized, even the internalized, if fail to achieve some goal, what happens? They succumb to their anxiety or they succumb to their depression. That is the internalized mode of responding. But my point is this: I have not achieved X, okay? So someone else has achieved X. So, and I'm succumbing to anxiety or depression, it's fine. But doesn't it mean there is some subtle form of jealousy is there, some subtle form of envy is there? It may be wrapped up with the feeling of, guilt. It may be expressed very directly by the externalized person. They may even adopt some sort of, unfair means to achieve that goal because my friend has achieved it. They will not go for that. But even if it is guilt wrapped, I say, isn't it cravings? So doesn't it create some interpersonal distance? Doesn't it create the class division like intellectual, non-intellectual, achiever, non-achiever like this? So isn't it based on our judgmentality? So what I want to say, let us think even for the 68% in the normal distribution, because we are also have the same type of problem in monitoring my attention, monitoring my emotion. And those who go for worldly comfort, in spite of beyond the necessity, people go for worldly comfort. In digital communication, what is happening? That is, the need for actual companionship is reducing. At the same time, so I do not like this person in the virtual world. There is the advantage. I delete it. I remove it. It's fine. So I am not learning the coping resources, how to deal with the person sitting beside me. And for that reason, what happens? That is, I do not have the tolerance, even if when they differ from me. But we know that individual difference is actually the premise. Everybody will be like me is not the premise at all. So pathological outcome leads to depression, anxiety, suicide. On the other hand, this type of behavior, or it may be impulsivity, reckless behavior, which is manifested by substance abuse, sexual misconduct, antisocial behavior, and so on. Sometimes I do say, suppose you're walking with great speed in one direction. Suddenly you may ask yourself, why am I walking so fast? Let me slow down. And you just stop and you just think. Likewise, when we do run through our life, when the mind is running so fast and towards an unwholesome direction, it's better we can ask, that is, why the mind is running in this direction. Should I slow down? Should I stop? Should I think? So it's very important. And here comes the importance of mindfulness. So mindfulness is paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and in a non-judgmental fashion. So meditation has 4 domains like this: attention regulation, body awareness, emotional regulation, and that leads to change in perspective of self. So attention monitoring can be focused attention monitoring, where the main task is to maintain attention in the present moment. And it also can be open monitoring, where I'm approaching, when we are asked to approach all the experience in life with curiosity and with openness and with acceptance, regardless of the balance, whether it is right or wrong, whether it is good or bad, whether it is joyful or frustrating, whatever it be, accept it as it is. And so usually the focused attention can say focus your entire attention on your, for example, it's not that always you have to be breathing, incoming and outgoing breath. Try to sustain their attention without any distraction. If you get distracted, calmly return your attention to the breath and start again. So you see how gentle the attention monitoring meditation is. And with the repeated practice, what happens, person can focus onto the attention, onto the intended object for a long period of time. And it's also that in regular life, in the real life situation, apart from this concentration practice, they become less distracted. That increases their concentration and executive attention. But thank you. So my point is this, that is why the youth mind, it's not only youth, for everybody's mind get distracted. So stimuli are considered as distractors when they are not situationally relevant. So if I do concentrate onto something on purpose, and if something distracts me, so that means that particular stimulus is equally or more than potent than to draw my attention. Otherwise, there is no reason that that I will be distracted. So automatic intrusion means thought is sufficiently potent to intrude, and it is possible when the thought is emotionally important to me. So what I do say that attention training is actually controlling the emotionally potent thoughts. So because the distractibility is increasing so much so in the present world, so this attention monitoring is very much required. Now it actually attention when I'm in conflict with not two stimuli and I'm attending to unintended object, that means there is a conflict. So when there is a conflict, this conflict monitoring is actually addressing where it is bringing change in the anterior cingulate cortex, and there are a lot of evidences. I cannot detail it now, but my point is this very interesting. When it is attention conflict monitoring is done by the ACC, this is the area for monitoring of our affective emotion also. So it has the capacity for monitoring autonomic functions. So better emotional awareness is associated with, attentional improvement. So the task, 5 minutes, I don't know how to complete. So attention and monitoring leads to automaticity. Another thing attention monitoring, what it does, that is our consciousness is actually series of occurring events. So the task of the we do things, so here actually continuous demand of alertness is there, because attention and monitoring makes us to concentrate onto the moment-to-moment dynamism of experience, and this is called chitta. And each chitta, even when it has the momentary existence, it has all the chetoshiks: phasa, contact, satana, volition, sanna, perception, jividendriya psychic energy, manasikara, attention, ekaggata, one-pointedness. So even that smallest experience has all the sensory, affective, and cognitive component. So you see, if I am equipped to attend to the moment, how strong is my attention and monitoring capacity? And for this arousal monitoring capacity is there in the reticular formation that actually excites our brain. You find how this area is also very rich, this brainstem area rich in the release of serotonin because of the presence of raphe nuclei. So here also is the possibility of emotion monitoring. And this chitta is characterized by akushala or kushala chitta. So akushala is dominated by hatred, greed, craving, aversion, fear, anxiety. Kushala by knowledge, insight, detachment, loving kindness, and goodwill. So the mindfulness wants to bring one from akushala to kushala. So when one is too much externalized, characterized by greed and all these things, so they have to follow the path of Ashtamarg. It's not that they have to reach the apex, but if they don't do it, it's very difficult, that is, it's not desirable that you will help them to practice mindfulness, because it may be harmful. Why I can come if you like to discuss. Social comparison. Now, even those who follow the righteous way of living, because they always compare themselves nowadays, the youth, oh, my achievement is less than my expectation. Frustration, achievement is less than others' achievement, jealousy, pressure to perform, stress, role conflict, what are we doing, this or that, they are confused. So in the open monitoring actually helps us to perceive anything as it is. Now, how this as it is possible if we become non-judgmental. Many a times father calls the child, you have got 15 minutes, I'm spending a lot of money, there are so many teachers, your mother is putting all the effort for you day and night, what are you doing? What message is going to the child? That the love of parent is instrumental to the performance of the child. The message is going that you are rejected if you do not act par with my expectation. But if you to say, okay, you have got 50, so these sums you have done, you have done it, isn't it? So, which you couldn't do. Let us sit for 15 days, for a fortnight, and we'll learn it. So, point is this, we have to be very much fact-based rather than the, secondary appraisal, which is very much inference-based. So, non-judgmental means exposure to present field with awareness, be affected by experience, refrain from engaging in internal reactivity toward it, accept the bodily changes, and that is the source of development of our empathy. If it is something painful, you just feel it, because any interoceptive stimuli, when it goes, it actually stimulates our insula, and which is related to our bodily experience. Exteroceptive goes to the somatosensory cortex, and mindfulness always emphasizes onto the bottom-up information processing without relating it to that concept of self. Whenever this moment-to-moment attention comes, so I'm saying that, okay, so it is not this thought, next moment is something different thought, next moment something different thought. So that means the thoughts, emotions are so transitory. So the concept comes, yes, is very much transitory. And when the self is, moving from this moment to that moment, it indicates self is also transitory. So the point is this. So so this non-judgmentality is very much important. So mindfulness meditation facilitates bottom-up processing, awareness of actual sensation, the stimulus as it is, non-judgmental acceptance of moment experience, nothing is bad or good, nothing is petty or important, unaltered bottom-up linking with the top-down evaluation. Suppose I am angry. So frame of eye is coordinated with the experience of anger. So now just take the observer perspective. I notice I am angry. So now frame of eye is dissociated from the anger. So for that reason, when self is fused with anger, negative connotation of anger is transferred to the self. But when I dissociate it, you see, there is non-reactivity. Just like the event operating outside, some event is going on inside me. So I see the event from distance and I see, okay, this is this. Suppose if it happens that I am a failure. So if I do like this, I am currently feeling as though I am a failure. So there is no suppression, there is no distortion, and don't try to change it, don't try to control it, don't try to avoid it. And you find that just like the extinction process in behavior modification, so you find, okay, that is the feeling is bad, and it will be replaced by, some other feeling. So it is not persistent, it is not something eternal. And when I find that, okay, so I'm comfortable with it, so extinction automatically comes. So mindfulness emphasizes onto the experiential focus and not the narrative focus. Self-referential elaboration is the narrative focus. Experiential focus emphasizes onto collecting the bottom-up data, and then you relate to the relevant part of the self only. So there are two different pathways, narrative and from neurologically. So what I want to say, if I can make myself like this, free from any defensive adjustment, if it is like this, that, I am non-judgmental, I can accept each and everything as it comes. So what happens, that is when there are some other persons, there I can feel the sentiment of loving kindness, just like may he or she be well and may he or she thrive. So that is the metta meditation. And karuna, that is feeling extended as if towards a sick child, may she be free from pain, may suffering. So I do not have any jealousy, I do not have any envy. So well, that's a problem if I do wish good for everybody, because I have that willfulness in me. Mudita is how mother feels towards a grown-up child. Though it may be painful to me, I feel joy for her. So equanimity is mother might feel that is the business of the child. She is attentive, caring. So mindfulness is not indifference. Mindfulness is not disengagement, but that emotional entanglement is not there. So sometimes I say, is it really detachment or it is transcendental attachment? Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Sorry you had to keep standing all the time.
No.
Yeah. That was a wonderful, wonderful talk. Thank you. Now we have the last speaker for the session, Dr. Nivedita Chelil. Dr. Nivedita Chelil. Welcome, Dr. Nivedita. Please come. Dr. Nivedita completed a PhD from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai, and is a mental health professional with over 2 decades of experience. She has an academic background which includes occupational therapy, counseling, psychiatric social work, art-based therapy, and Buddhist psychology. Currently, she runs Earth, a mental health initiative in Mumbai, and offers a course in applied Buddhist psychology in 2 cities, Mumbai and Chennai. Her presentation, Healing ADD in Today's Youth, the view of the practitioner, draws from her experiences in the field and her perceived need for reflective practice. So, Dr. Nivedita is speaking mainly from the point of view of practitioner, the real practitioner in the field. That's going to be very valuable for all of us.
Thank you. Like Shrinjan, I'm uncomfortable with this gadget as well. Am I audible? Okay, lovely. In case, yes, thank you. And I'll try not to fidget. Attention deficit disorder is not only for clients, sometimes it's also for us. How is everybody's attention right now? Good? All right. First of all, very good afternoon. I'm very grateful to be here, to the organizing team at Tibet House, Venerable Geshe-la. Also very importantly to all of my teachers and teachings, without of which I wouldn't really be here today. I must also confess it's great fun to be the last person on the panel, because to a large extent, many things have been said. And in some ways it makes my job easier. It's such an honor to have shared the panel with so many wonderful speakers who've brought in so many different perspectives. I'm going to try and tie in some of that while I then try and shift perspective as well. Okay. Many things have been talked about with attention deficit disorder. So, for example, we started the talk with Dr. Gupta setting the tone for this panel. Then we had Shrinjan, who discussed several aspects of ADHD in terms of what we see, in terms of signs and symptoms, after which we had a look at Buddhist psychology, and in some ways that continued with Dr. Preeta's presentation as well. Broadly, what we need to understand is with any kind of condition, there are several aspects that get mentioned. What do you see? What are the causes? What kind of treatment can be done? And therefore, how can we help the person who's coping and living with this? The other part of it which becomes important is also, in addition to the condition, to keep in mind the larger context. You know, like Dr. Preeta mentioned about meaninglessness and freedom and perhaps some amount of technology. Or in cities like ours, where I come from in Mumbai, we have no open spaces. We don't have nature. So what happens when somebody doesn't have access to nature and has access to a lot of gadgets? Not about painting something as good or bad, but to be able to start recognizing that we are diagnosing, treating, and intervening in an evolving context. And to be able to stay with all of that becomes important. My talk in some ways is going to shift perspective. What do I mean by shifting perspective? The kind of work I do is on a one-to-one basis, where there's a client or their family members, and I'm sitting across them, and we try and work with symptoms that are being manifested. This is typically what we call a therapeutic setting, in which case the person who is sitting in front of me gets called by different names. You can say client, you can say patient, you can say, in some cases, like some of you are teachers, in which case there would be a student there. The person who is practicing could be coming from different perspectives. So it could be a psychiatrist, it could be a counselor, it could be a therapist. I'm going to use the term practitioner or therapist more or less to describe the person who is doing the intervention, and the person who is seeking the intervention, I'm going to refer to them as client because that comes easily to my tongue, but it could refer to any of these words. What we need to understand is that in this process, the practitioner is coming with an intention of wanting to benefit the person who is coming to seek help, and second, has been trained in a certain school of thought. So in my talk, what I really want to do is shift focus, not on ADHD or ADD as a symptom or a condition that the person is dealing with, nor with just that person who is dealing with the condition, but really to shift perspective to the practitioner, saying this practitioner who is using a certain school or lens, and what is it that we want to really recognize is how is that lens really being operationalized and how is that lens really being used, and that's where my focus is going to be. So what is a lens or a school of thought? Okay, I like cats. What do we mean by a lens or a school of thought? And I think yesterday's panel was a wonderful example where you had a physician from Tibetan medicine, you had an Ayurvedic physician, and you had an allopathic physician sharing the same panel. Our lens is where our training lies. What have we been trained as? So for example, if I'm trained as a psychiatrist, what I look for is different from what I look for perhaps if I am a therapist, in terms of predominant things that I'm going to pick up when a client calls me or visits my center. Second, how do we interpret what we'll see? Is somebody, for example, drawing on the wall? Is it a sign of hyperactivity? Is it a sign of boredom? Is it a sign of wanting attention? Is it a mixture of all of them? Is it just because they thought the wall was very boring and really doing it out of great compassion for the next person who has to sit in front of the wall? So the idea of recognizing how we interpret what we see really comes from our lens. What interventions we choose, when we attend any training, what really happens is it's like a buffet. You're being trained in using a whole set of skills. Out of these skills and techniques that you've been taught, which ones are you going to select and how you're going to apply those interventions for a particular person? What are the outcomes that we try and observe? And therefore, how do we understand our role? Now, the problem is this. When it comes to learning theory, we all hear theory. We've all attended some amount of school and college. What happens when theory is being presented to you? Point 1, 2, 3. Point 1 has subpoint A, B, C. Yes? No. Extremely linear, very structured. But what happens when you suddenly have to deal with a client or a student or a group? Is it that linear? Hardly ever, no? The idea of recognizing what we have to do as practitioners is take that theory, which is very linear, very structured, process it in some way, and then bring it to deliver it in some usable way to a client. This process is not linear by any means. In fact, it is rather messy and it is rather chaotic. And therefore, I think in some ways, I suspect at least, that's why it doesn't get talked about so much. This linear process in some ways becomes easier. It's a little more controllable. So now the question is, what really happens in the field and why do I like to call it practice? In certain other research papers, it's also been called as knowledge in action. Some people have also called it the craft. The idea of recognizing that there is a specific training that any one of us has in working with, whether it's clients with ADD or anything else. The second is the person who is using the set of skills. And the third is this context in which it is being utilized. And all three of these become equally relevant, because what it means is I'm taking this extremely linear process, doing something to it, with it, based on my abilities, and then being able to kind of transfer it in a manner in which my context allows me. So for example, if I've chosen to work on a one-to-one setting, it has to do with certain kinds of ideas about how I want to work, as opposed to, let's say, working in a hospital setting, which then would define what I do, how much time I have with my clients, what kind of outcomes I need to deliver, and so on and so forth. So coming to what I would like to call the story of the practitioner. All of us as practitioners, we are not these neutral, clean, pathways through which some training manifests unadulterated fashion. We are also messy individuals who have chaotic lives. And the idea of really recognizing our socio-demographic profile, our age, intergenerational patterns, what kind of anxiety, what kind of things have been told to me while I'm growing up, have I really moved in my own journey? What is my life stressors? So what is the age and stage in which I'm working? Being able to start getting a sense of how those affect me is critical. So for example, if I look back at sessions I conducted, let's say 20 years ago, and I look back at sessions that I conduct today, there is a sea of difference. It does not mean the old me was bad or malintentioned. It means that now I have 20 years more of some accumulated wisdom and some accumulated fatigue perhaps, which changes the nature of my session. The idea of really being able to recognize where we are today and how that is constantly at play with how we take this theory and apply it is critical. I don't say this in any way, so it's a little bit of a disclaimer, the idea of human connection as a bad thing. I think it is an extremely valuable thing, and all of our studies today, especially in relation to trauma and healing, we find that one of the ways in which we want to facilitate healing is through human connection. Think back about our own lives, times where we've had really feel-good moments. Most of the time they've been shared. There's been something where there's been a human connection which has felt authentic, which has kind of highlighted how alive we feel. So when I say this humanness of therapy and practice, I'm saying this with a great amount of love, affection, and admiration and respect, because I feel this is what makes therapy workable. In current research also, I should highlight, there have been, especially in psychotherapy and counseling, there's plenty of research which says what works, what doesn't work. Part of it comes from saying my school is better than your school. But what we've eventually discovered is that tools and techniques matter up to a point. The main element in therapy which really works is the relationship, what we call attunement and engagement. And if attunement and engagement is there, then there is almost a very high probability that your therapy is going to have a good outcome. So really what I want to do is recognizing, if I now understand that all of these parts of me are critical in my work with anybody, how do I enhance it? And the best way really that we have, at least that I could think of for the sake of being here in this presentation, is really what we mean is by our ability to reflect. Now, some schools of thought, like Buddhism, and I feel very grateful for Geshe-la and Tibet House and His Holiness to initiate the Nalanda Masters program, because there we talk about not just learning, but it's learning with contemplation and action. Because you recognize when you hear a theory versus when you need to act, there is something in between. And that in-between process needs to get addressed actively. In Western approaches in the last half of the earlier century, this started getting addressed more seriously. And you had Sean, who has written several books on reflection, and he talks about two kinds of reflection. One is reflection in action. So for example, when I'm in a session, can I think about what's going on? Or if I make an example closer home, just now I'm speaking to you. Can I also, is there a part of me that is now thinking about, how's my talk going? Are people paying attention? Are they not paying attention? Should I change it? Should I make it faster, slower, so on? This concept is called reflection in action during the moment. The second is reflection on action. When you say reflection on action is, if I continue with this example, after the talk is over, where I stop and think, how did it go? Did I say what I had to? Did it work? Did people want it, need it? So on and so forth. An analysis of sorts. And this part of it is really, both parts are kind of critical. Here again, I think Buddhism has something which is very strong that I think we should highlight. When we sit for meditation, how many meditative practitioners here? Some? Okay, trying. How many budding, aspiring meditation practitioners? Okay, nice to see more hands going up. When we sit for meditation, what is it that we want? What is the attitude that we sit with? It's that of openness and expansiveness. We are not sitting with this tightness. When we observe our breath, when we observe our thoughts, depending on what kind of practice we're engaging in, one of the primary aspects is our attitude with which we sit. And in some ways, I feel that becomes critical. Connecting this with what Dr. Preeta said, a non-judgmental, open kind of space. Our reflection also needs to stem from there. So broadly, when we talk about no matter what our practice is, whether you're a therapist, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a student, frankly, when it comes to any of us, there's a broad series of reflective questions which can help us improve where we are at today, to reach higher levels of becoming better and hopefully become as established and with as much depth as Dr. Chandra, who was speaking yesterday. So some of the questions that we look at is, for example, what is my practice like today? And this does not have to do only with meditation or only with intervention. It could just have to do with what is your learning style, for example, or what is your consultation style if you are a therapist, or what is my teaching style if you're a teacher. How did it come to be like this, and what factors kind of supported this process? When I am doing all of this, what Srinjoy spoke about Hoja's story, where light is on the dumpster and not in the basement. When I practice in my current manner, where is my light being shown? Because all of us choose certain specific areas to respond and to connect with. What does this mean? Not that there's anything fundamentally wrong with shining your light on any one space, but it means that there are perhaps many other spaces which don't get as much of our own attention. And being able to reflect on that is critical. When I work in my current scenario, then where is my whose interests are being served? So you see this, for example, where therapists a few years later start talking about compassion fatigue. They're serving the interest of the client, serving interest of clients, serving interest of clients, repeatedly until they reach a point of saying, I have no more to give, what we otherwise commonly call burnout. Are there other alternatives? Are there other ways of growth? The idea of being able to use these reflective questions is really to kind of promote and move towards a space where we are able to engage with our own practice in a deeper, more honest and more authentic way. The other way of doing it is to pick up on specific events. So for example, if I start with the 12 o'clock, it says description, where after an event is over, can I genuinely describe what happened during this consultation? This is factual, not our own interpretation. Client came late because he is always late is not fact, it is interpretation. Client came late by 10 minutes is fact. The idea of learning to even separate fact from opinion is critical. And then through the rest of the session or through what we document, to start asking ourselves, where were my thoughts and feelings? Was I a little irritated? Was I a little cranky? Was I hungry maybe because it was approaching lunchtime? What were my feelings like? Then I ask myself, what was good or not good in that consultation and space? I apologize for the red dotted line, which seems to have slid away during formatting. Anyway, continuing with the fourth part is analysis. With analysis, what we want to do is really move deeper into asking ourselves what really happened at a deeper level. What are certain spaces where I said more than necessary? Certain spaces where I maybe said less than necessary, because those may be coming from our own sets of triggers and our sets of issues that we face. What is the conclusion that I come to with this? When I come to this no problem. When I come to a conclusion and then I move into an action plan, the action plan is really going to help me with my future. So what the red dotted line was supposed to do, the first three, that is description, thoughts, feelings, and evaluation, are actually things that we do about the session itself. The analysis and conclusion is what we spoke about as reflection on action. And the last part, which is the action plan, actually is a reflection for future action. So if we are able to reflect today about how we are, what it perhaps means is we have a slightly more better and more effective way of being tomorrow. Which means if I used to shine my light perhaps on lack of nature, or perhaps too much tech, or perhaps I look at family systems and how they are intervening with ADD, now it allows me to kind of broaden my scope. It allows me to broaden my perspective. It allows me to recognize strengths, limitations, and issues that I perhaps have and need to work on further to improve my practice, and therefore allows us to create spaces where we can be more mindful and increase our levels of mindfulness, because it's not only about the client becoming mindful, like some of the earlier speakers have highlighted. And this will help us bring in more meaningful interactions and more beneficial outcomes in therapy. So I added this slide after yesterday's question on saying Tibetan medicine or Ayurvedic medicine or allopathic medicine. I say this with a great amount of humility, and I say this with a great amount of compassion to all of my practitioners. Each of us, at least to the best of my knowledge, none of us here have achieved omniscience. Until then, we are all struggling with trying to understand the truth, and understand the truth with a manner that we can bring benefit to many people. And as we try to do this, we hold on to it saying, this is true, but perhaps to recognize the more we are able to dialogue and work with each other, the more we are able to come together to say a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and be able to open our minds. I think there is a greater likelihood of moving towards truth. So with that, thank all of you for allowing me, and I hope I'm willing to. Okay.
Thank you so much for a wonderful talk, Dr. Nivedita. I think she is the one who's really reflected on from the practitioner's point of view. Most of us, don't do that. We are only focusing on the clients. Yeah, so it's a wonderful talk. Thank you. We have very little time left, but we have to take a few questions. So just 2 questions we can entertain. So anybody who, please, maybe the back. Could you please?
Would you like to say?
You can.
Good afternoon. I'll restrict to one question only. My question is to Mr. Srinjoy Ghosh. Since you're working in school, so I was asking, if there is some, if you're talking about ADHD and there is some factor, which is let's say with some intervention we precipitate the problem, but it may reoccur after some age. So how do you combine your technique with the career counseling of the students? Because let's say they're in class 11th and 12th, after 10th basically, and your intervention has worked out for them, but maybe there is certain factor which will lead to in later. So how do you advise the career counseling in that particular case? Because that's
Thank you for your question. That's actually a very important. And frankly speaking, all I can say is that's a big challenge. Because what happens, what we are trying to do, it's of course in-house and where we are working, but when it comes to career counseling, so that is something usually in most of the institutions it's outsourced, and that is where the big challenge lies, and so that's a big struggle. And frankly speaking, I don't know how to go about it. As she mentioned, we are still learners, we are still struggling with a lot of things. But the idea, the focus is how inside the, in-house, we can create a space and facilitate an atmosphere which is really caring and compassionate, both for the students as well as the person engaging with the student. So that is the main focus here.
I just wanted to add something to that. Another way in which we look at continued learning is the same skills of reflection. Sometimes also training our clients to reflect on what is working for them and what is not working for them, so that they are able to retain those as part of what they want to commit. Because, at some point of time, our job is to make ourselves redundant and not needed anymore. So the idea of providing those sets of skills where reflection is part of thinking about what works and doesn't work, and giving them the strength to make sure they can create conditions which are going to help them sustain what it is.
Thank you. There's another question, please.
I have. I'm looking at what all information was shared today, And the thing that struck me was most of the things that you talk of attention deficit disorder, I seem to be suffering from. And I never thought of it like that. So the question really came that, firstly, why am I branding myself as somebody with a disorder? What is the norm for order here? And at the same time, we talk of mindfulness and talk of being non-judgmental. So by referring to myself as suffering from attention disorder, I have judged myself. And I don't know what to do with this, so I thought I'll ask you.
Okay, yeah, that's a very important question. I think I was also wondering when all of us were discussing the issues, we have to make a distinction between what is a disorder and what is not a disorder. Disorder is something, an extreme form. So many of us are suffering from inattention problems and hyperactivity every now and then we show in a wide variety of different situations. But there are norms to qualify as a disorder, which means that there are certain set of symptoms which are to be seen persistently in a variety of different types of situations. That's the first thing. Second thing is that for at least last 6 months, you should have been suffering from symptoms like this. Otherwise, every now and then we reveal symptoms of these kinds and we come out of it and we behave very normally. So that is not a disorder at all. Many of us actually confuse that we are suffering from a disorder. I remember having written some articles for the newspaper on dyslexia, sometimes ADHD and so on. So many people call me up, my child is suffering from ADHD disorder. This is not really true, because people tend to think that if there is some kind of symptom named, this is a disorder. It's not really. We need to really come out of the word disorder. Disorder is actually a psychiatric term. We label somebody as having disorder. You're very right in saying that you are judgmental. You're telling the person, look here, you are suffering from this problem. So we cannot afford to be saying that, oh, I'm not judgmental. Though, of course, to a client, we don't ever say that you are suffering from this kind of a disorder. But perhaps sometimes the need is that we tell the parent or the other caregivers, look, there is a problem, which is what is going on and can go on for a lifelong. So it is important for you to take some sessions which are going to be of great help to you to be improving the quality of life and also not suffer in the later years to come. But then to label somebody to have a disorder is something very, very different. We should really do away with this term and we should not really use that until unless we find somebody really, really suffering from disorder and there are terms and conditions for that.
Just, if I can add on to that 1 minute, sir. So just to add on to what ma'am already said. So I think for, like for our day-to-day, everyday human beings, of course, not everybody is, well versed with the psychological terms. A simple thing that we can go about is understanding the 4 Ds, what we say. So distress, danger, dysfunction, and I forgot the last one, sorry. Do you remember the last one, anyone? Okay, so basically there are 4 Ds. First is whether. Yes, so basically, where I am able to function in my daily life or not, right? And how much? And then, of course, danger. Am I danger to myself or danger to others? And distress is where I am always stressed in whatever I am doing, and also that stress is having a ripple effect to the people around me. And of course, there is this constant dissatisfaction that is there. So I think that's another very, very of course, it's not easy, but it's a simple method of maybe pulling yourself out from the doubt. Thank you.
So we really don't have much time left, but maybe just quick question, please. Yeah, please go ahead. Finish.
Sir, you talked
Last
about,
question, please.
Yes, you talked about certain remedies for children with this attention disorder. I just want to ask, okay, if a child is suffering from such a disorder, how can we make him do mindful walk and mindful eating? That's my second question is, as I'm new to this term, I want to know what is pause well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pause well. Okay. So usually what happens, so one thing that I really mentioned in the talk, so you can please sit. Yeah. So that is that the person who is actually engaging with the student or the children, so the person first needs himself or herself has to go through that mindfulness. You can't just tell, okay, take a mindful walk. That will not mean anything to the child. So the mindful walk is basically, a simple thing like what we have started doing. It's like an evening walk we do, where we take the children out with ourselves, and we stop either pausing to watch, because we have a very beautiful campus also. We're blessed with that. So simply watching some beautiful flowers growing, appreciating that, or even having some sort of reflection as to how I am feeling looking at that flower, or listening to the birds chirping. So very, very simple ways which you can actually include in mindful walk. The mindful bell, so that's basically what I do, as I mentioned, is that there is an app. So usually I've downloaded that app. It's called the Mindful Bell app, and there is a timer. So very interestingly, what we do is that whatever we are doing, so I time it. So if they are able to hear the bell at any point of time, the bell goes gong, something like that. So then everybody they have to stop whatever they're doing and bring their focus on their breath for 2 minutes, and after that again they can start working. And this has actually helped a lot in not only quieting the chatter mind, but also on understanding what exactly I'm working on.
Just one.
Go ahead, please.
Just one small addition to that. In Buddhism, we talk about skillful means to be able to recognize where the client or person is at, so that we're able to match where they're at. So, for example, with breath, with children, many times we take their stuffed toy, which is their favorite, and we make them lie down with keeping it on the belly to say, how is it moving? Is it not moving? To get them to focus on breath. Or with games, in terms of saying who walks slowest, or you put a balloon on the finger and say you walk with this. The idea being that the more skillful we are, it's not to say that they must learn concept of mindfulness conceptually, but that if they can be practicing it in different ways, it works very well.
Yes. We just quickly, please.
असेसमेंट भी कराया उसका, अभी वो 21 साल 3rd ईयर का, मतलब अपना वो परसू कर रहा है, अल्लाह वो कर रहा है। तो मैं जानना चाह रहा था कि किस स्टेज तक ये रहता है। जैसे भी हम देखते हैं शॉर्ट टेम्पर है, गाड़ी ड्राइव कर रहा है तो थोड़ा कॉशियस होके, मतलब जैसे क्लास में होता है तो बहुत सारे क्वेश्चनिंग होते हैं उसकी, तो कब तक मतलब हमारे पेरेंट्स के लिए क्या कुछ सजेस्ट करेंगे। और मतलब जैसे कि फिल्म में भी हमने देखा तारे जमीन पे, तो बच्चे तक ही था, उसके बाद अब जो हम 21 साल के लड़के के साथ डील कर रहे हैं, तो उस समय क्या है।
जो तारे जमीन में था वो अलग था, वो अटेंशन डेफिसिट डिसऑर्डर नहीं। आप प्लीज बैठिए, वो अलग था, इसलिए आप कंफ्यूज मत होइए। सेकंड चीज ये है, जैसे कि मैं आपको शुरू में ही बता रही थी कि लाइफ लॉन्ग प्रॉब्लम है। अब उसको सिखाना है कि कैसे, अभी मैम ने बोला जैसे स्किलफुल अंडरस्टैंडिंग, स्किलफुल कॉग्निशन, स्किलफुल कॉन्टेम्पलेशन, स्किलफुल एक्शन, ये सारी चीजें जो है ना उनको स्टेज वाइज अकॉर्डिंग टू हिज एज एंड अकॉर्डिंग टू वट एवर दैट ही इज डूइंग। सपोजिंग ड्राइविंग के लिए जा रहे हैं और बहुत रैश हो जा रहे हैं और नहीं ठीक से करा रहे हैं, तो आपको उसी हिसाब से उनको ट्रेनिंग देनी पड़ेगी। और वो ट्रेनिंग देना हर एक स्टेज पे बहुत ज़रूरी है, क्योंकि देखिए अगर ट्रेनिंग नहीं होगा तो मैनेज करना अपने आप को और अपनी सराउंडिंग्स को उनके लिए काफ़ी मुश्किल हो जाएगा। इसलिए आपको यू डोंट हैव टू फील अपसेट, यू डोंट हैव टू फील disheartened about anything. See, all of us are suffering from some problem or the other, and we are finding some kind of a skill, some kind of a strategy to deal with our own problems every now and then. But these are the people who have problems, and as I told you right in the beginning, these are brain related problems. You see, many of times the brain is functioning in such a manner that they lose control over what they are doing. So we have to regulate the brain activity by making a few exercises which are very individualized in nature. तो आप सोचिए कि कहाँ उसमें उनको डिफिकल्टी है, उसके हिसाब से maybe you can seek some help from a professional who's around and you can help us to draw out some individualized programs. And it can't be, as ma'am was very rightly saying that nothing can be so structured. Depends upon what the situation is, what the surroundings are. Accordingly, you have to keep training. And reflective practices, as all of you have discussed so beautifully, mindfulness is really doing wonders. See, these days, as psychologists, we're using a large number of techniques for attention deficit disorders, and many of them are really working out beautifully. There are several attention-based training programs which are now very, very prevalent. Okay, so we can do that. We can use computers. Children are all the time on computers, on mobile phones, and so on. They are very helpful devices for them to be trained, but then they have to be monitored by you. You cannot leave it to them at all. Time regulation has to be there so that they are able to regulate themselves. Self-monitoring, self-control, impulse control. There are so many issues which are involved, which can be done making use of daily life materials. You don't have to go for any specialized thing, but you see what are the kind of materials that a person is dealing with, and accordingly you can devise them. You can help the child or the adult to deal with them meaningfully. Lastly, I just wanted to say that since we are talking about it's a brain, let's not forget that it is a brain-related disorder. It has been scientifically proved. So what we have to devise is the methodology which is going to enable our brain to regulate the underlying cognition. Our underlying cognition here, to start with, it means focused attention. What is lacking is, to start with, the focused attention is not there. Inattention, because we are not able to listen. We are missing out so many details. Okay, so the techniques which we are using, see, many of us as psychologists, we are using behavioral therapies, we are using cognitive behavior therapy and so on. But nowadays, mindfulness-based cognitive behavior therapy is very, 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 very effectively found to be, as research evidence is showing. So please combine mindfulness-based therapy with cognitive behavior therapy. It does wonders. But of course, for mindfulness, you have to go through training first. Please don't use it because there are so many steps which are involved in it. And if you get yourself meaningfully trained, you can train your adult child also, and you can train anybody around. And this can be a very good practice for you to adopt in daily life. So I must thank all the speakers for their very good participation and such wonderful insights that we've all got. And I must thank all of you. I think you've been all so actively participating and so much of attention. Nobody seems to be having any inattention problem or whatever. Forget about disorder. Let's not use the word disorder. I am very against it. Okay, only in very, very few extreme cases we use the word disorder. Okay, let's think that we are all very much in order, and that we can improve our functioning, our quality of life by working hard on us. We cannot afford to be in automatic pilot mode, which we are normally. We just do things as based on our habit patterns, but we need to think, we need to reflect, we need to see what are the different routes that we can adopt for our lives, and I think that's going to be much more meaningful for all of us. Thank you very much, and I would like to thank Sheila once again for giving me this opportunity to be with you all, and thank you once again. Thank you.
Please be seated. Please be seated. Yeah, thank you very much. And I would like to request Mrs. Asha Reddy ji to do the honor to present the souvenir and kata to our chairperson and the speakers. Dr. Ashum Gupta ji. Please give round of applause to them. Yeah, thank you. Mr. Shinjoy Goji. Dr. Ankit Goyal ji. Professor Prita Mukhopadhyay ji. Dr. Nivedita Chalil ji. Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Asha Reddy ji. Yeah, please take a seat. Yeah, the next session is at 1:45 p.m. and there are few announcements to be made. And please bring your lunch coupon at the venue. And we are live streaming the event in Tibet House Facebook. And kindly share it through your accounts and let us know your friends if they couldn't able to attend here in person. And thank you very much. Happy lunch.